In January, I believe you were at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the things that we had chatted about in prepping for this was, some of the top issues that you were both listening to and probably contributing towards. And one of the main things that we had talked about was hybrid work and how that was top of mind. Could you maybe open up the conversation? Just why is that such a big topic, and why was that something that was so top of mind for the CEOs at the World Economic Forum?
Yeah, it really was a top of mind issue. And I think it's interesting, we're seeing just dramatic changes in how we work. We've, for a long time been talking about the future of work. We'd published papers on it, et cetera. Now it's here and it's still not stable, if you will. So we see, thanks to COVID, a huge acceleration in digital technology, which has changed how people work in lots of different ways, but especially how we interact like we are right now over a virtual medium. I'm not in some studio with you, and I can do meetings, back to back to back like this all day, right? And so we've created all of this new flexibility in where and how people work with virtual capabilities. But there are some real downsides and some concerns about whether we can monitor people's productivity as effectively as we could when they were in the office, whether we are creating a sense of belonging, whether we're connecting people to purpose, whether people have the same career development opportunities. And I think that, we see a combination of a change in technology, but also a real change in workforce expectations coming out of COVID. And so we're not in a stable place where everybody is aligned on what the right answer is. We have companies that are insistent that everybody get back to the workplace and kind of go back to how things were. And we have other companies that are just as insistent that a purely virtual workforce could be perfectly satisfactory, and everything in between.
Yeah, I was reading just in this morning, I think it was in the journal, where it was talking about in Europe that going back to office is like almost 90% or something like that. And in the US, it's probably closer to 70, and it kind of is between some ranges, but obviously significantly higher in other parts of the world. Is that jibe with what you guys are seeing?
We're seeing exactly the same thing. And, so what we've been trying to do is say, what we really care about for our teams is that we solve for really good outcomes. There's been lots of polling of colleagues and employees about what you prefer, or how important is flexibility. And that is actually, of course, very important. I think that the demand for flexibility is not going to go away, even if we do continue to see a change in the balance of power, if you will, between employers and employees. I think the demand for flexibility is here to stay. And we can offer flexibility because of the changes in technology and work practices. But what we are trying to do is really understand what's driving the outcomes that we care about. When do we get the best client or customer feedback? When do we see the best skill acquisition and development of our colleagues? When do we see the most kind of fun, and kind of sense of purpose? And when do we see the best retention, frankly? And what we are seeing is that there is kind of a happy medium that when our teams are together for about 50% of the time, not a 2-day-a-week kind of rule, but over time are getting together about 50%, we see a real reduction in attrition. And we see an increase in personal development and the ability to create new experiences, new skills. So we are trying to kind of help our teams figure out what are the models that really drive the best outcomes.
Yeah, so that's interesting. The 50% of the time, but I guess sort of traditionally we've bound that in week time increments. And I'm hearing you say maybe that's not the best model, that we need to perhaps expand that horizon a little bit.
Yeah. And what we're seeing, for example, is that when you're working together at the beginning of a new project, a new initiative, something important, it might be very important to spend some time in person, really bonding, really working through in person what the real scope is going to be, managing some of the conflict that is inevitably going to come as you start something. And then there are periods of time when individuals or whole teams are working pretty independently on their own kind of pieces of work, and the value of being in person is just not as high. But then there are places where you're trying to do real breakthrough problem solving. And we haven't seen that we can really replicate some of the magic of being together to do real breakthrough innovation with technology. But technology is improving all the time. So I think this balance about what the benefits and pros and cons of different modalities of work will continue to change and shift.
Yeah, it's sort of the right tool for the right job, right?
Right,
And,
exactly right.
when you're in a collaboration intensive, ideation heavy phase of a project, people work better together and those ideas spark. And there's something very natural about the analog thing of like a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Right. Just like, and scribbling and drawing, like, no, let's try this again.
Yeah.
That, like, trying to fumble your way through that in a digital kind of way doesn't maybe work as well. But then as we progress down the project timeline, it's like, okay, now we're just going to do data analysis. Well, I don't need to be in the office to do data analysis, as an example. Right?
Exactly. I think one of the, issues that companies have faced when they've tried to mandate people getting back together is that people come back into an office to do exactly the same work they were doing at home, but potentially less comfortably and with the irritation of a commute and with less flexibility to manage their work around their personal demands as well. But we do see, to your point, we are getting better at virtual collaboration. So I don't think that the virtual whiteboards are quite as good as a whiteboard, on a wall in a conference room yet, but they will get there. And we are seeing some places where people are really taking advantage of hybrid kind of work approaches to create cross-site collaboration in a way that we never had before. So it used, people annotating on a document altogether or annotating in a Zoom meeting. These are things that are actually raising a kind of voices and an ability to collaborate in a way that people are just not used to and have found a way to do. So we'll continue to get better, I think, at virtual work, and we'll continue to get better at really thinking about fit for purpose in-person work as well.
Yes. Well, and then that's probably the best way to put it, Bowen. It's fit for purpose. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? And then, as you said earlier, being outcome oriented.
Right.
Yeah. So let's focus on what are we actually trying to do here, and then make that sort of the king measure. Are we actually accomplishing what we set to accomplish? And then I think, if I heard you correctly, the other piece of that is that positively impacting, the employee experience, maybe as measured by satisfaction, personal growth, retention, things like that.
Exactly. At McKinsey, we talk about having a dual mission. We're about creating fantastic impact for our clients, but also creating a really fantastic growth opportunity and place to thrive for our people. And I think that mindset is the right one to bring to these questions about hybrid work. How do you do both at once? And I do think we'll see continued change. And of course, all teams don't do the same kind of thing. If you have a team which really is doing mostly transactional, kind of independent work, maybe being in person is less important, even over a longer period of time.